Florentino Perez has already made up his mind, and if the whispers are true, the next manager of Real Madrid could leave the Santiago Bernabéu crowd stunned. Elsewhere, the transfer market is heating up fast. Bernardo Silva is reportedly edging toward a surprising move to Turkey, while Manchester United are lining up a deal for a key defender from Tottenham Hotspur. Meanwhile, questions are beginning to swirl around Alexis Mac Allister, with Liverpool FC potentially open to cashing in on their Argentine midfielder. There's plenty to get through today, and if the momentum keeps building, there's no doubt more chaos is just around the corner. The managerial carousel at Chelsea FC has taken yet another dramatic turn. Liam Rosenior lasted just 104 days in charge, making him the fastest sacked manager in the club's history. That dubious record edges past Roberto Di Matteo, who at least used his slightly longer tenure to deliver a Champions League title. Rosenior, by contrast, leaves with an 8th place standing and little else to show for it. While his compensation package could reportedly reach €28 million, there's already speculation that he may never see that money. But the deeper issue isn't the payout, it's the decision that led to his appointment in the first place. From the outset, it felt misjudged. Rosenior arrived without experience at a club of Chelsea's magnitude and lacked the kind of track record that would normally justify such a high-profile role. Strip it back, and the appeal seems to have been his manageability. Under Todd Boehly, Chelsea's leadership appeared to favor a coach who wouldn't challenge authority, disrupt internal dynamics, or overshadow the hierarchy. Rosenior fit that mold perfectly, but that same profile also suggested he would struggle to lift a team out of a slump. Unsurprisingly, that's exactly how things played out. Now Chelsea find themselves back at square one, searching for yet another manager, and the situation is quickly turning into a sideshow of its own. With interim duties handed to Neil MacDonald, a familiar face at the club, the focus shifts to the long-term appointment. Yet every name being linked comes with its own complications. Andoni Iraola stands out as a coach with genuine credentials, having built an impressive structure at AFC Bournemouth. He represents method, discipline, and long-term planning. However, stability is reportedly his top priority, and that's precisely what Chelsea have failed to offer. Add in suggestions that his family favors a return to Spain, and Stamford Bridge begins to look like an unlikely destination. Then there's Edin Terzic, who brings experience at the highest level and a clear understanding of how elite clubs function. On paper, he appears to be the most balanced and realistic option available. Cesc Fabregas, on the other hand, presents a more sentimental case. His history with Chelsea and promising work at Como 1907 make for an intriguing narrative, but the leap from Como to Chelsea is enormous. Success at one doesn't guarantee readiness for the other, especially when time is a luxury Chelsea rarely afford. And then there's the biggest name of them all, Diego Simeone. Reports from Spain suggest his long tenure with Atletico Madrid may be nearing its natural conclusion. After more than a decade of squeezing every ounce of success from the club, a fresh start would make sense. But Simeone isn't a quiet figurehead, he's demanding, outspoken, and expects full control. That alone raises serious questions about his compatibility with Chelsea's current structure under Boehly. Tactically, the potential clash is just as significant. Players like Cole Palmer have flourished in systems that encourage freedom and creativity. Simeone's philosophy, however, is rooted in discipline, structure, and restriction, principles that could stifle that very freedom. It wouldn't just be a gamble, it would feel like an inevitable collision unless both sides clearly define expectations before committing. In truth, the only way forward for Chelsea is clarity. Without it, any appointment, no matter how big the name, risks becoming just another short-lived chapter in an increasingly chaotic era. If recent history is anything to go by, meaningful discussions before handing out contracts aren't exactly a defining feature of how Chelsea FC operate. Decisions tend to move quickly, often without the kind of deep planning you'd expect at this level. And that same sense of urgency, or perhaps impatience, is now playing out elsewhere, particularly in the case of Mickey van de Venerable behind the scenes. Van de Ven appears to have already started positioning himself for a move, the kind of quiet maneuvering that usually signals a player has made up his mind well before his club catches on. According to reports, Manchester United have identified the Dutch defender as a key target ahead of the next transfer window. With a return to European competition on the horizon, United are desperate to rebuild a defensive line that has looked fragile under pressure all season. Injuries to players like Lisandro Martinez have exposed just how thin the squad is at the back, and the need for a reliable, left-footed centre-back has become impossible to ignore. Van de Ven fits that profile almost perfectly. He brings pace, composure, and the ability to play out from the back, qualities that would allow United to push their defensive line higher with confidence. Right now, attempting that would feel less like a tactical evolution and more like an invitation for opponents to exploit the space. Back at Tottenham Hotspur, the situation is far from straightforward. Van de Ven's contract runs until 2029, which in theory gives Spurs control. But football rarely works in absolutes. If the club were to slip into relegation trouble, and that possibility hasn't been entirely ruled out, the financial landscape changes dramatically. In that scenario, a major sale wouldn't be optional, it would be necessary. Sources suggest that relegation could force Tottenham into selling or loaning out key players, and Van de Ven seems fully aware of that reality. From United's perspective, this isn't a simple case of writing a check and closing the deal. Under Jim Ratcliffe, there's a clear push to restructure the squad more carefully. Players like Manuel Ugarte, who arrived with a hefty price tag but failed to justify it, are now seen as expendable. Any funds generated from such departures are expected to form the foundation for new signings. The approach is pragmatic: clear out underperforming assets first, then reinvest. What makes Van de Ven particularly appealing is that his reputation has actually grown despite the instability around him. That's a rare trait. He's one of those players who manages to stand out positively even when the team struggles, and that contrast has only increased his value. It's no surprise, then, that multiple top European clubs are monitoring his situation. United are just one of several interested parties, which also explains why discussions are being handled quietly. When competition is genuine, discretion becomes essential. For Tottenham, the equation is brutally simple. If they want to keep their best players, they must remain in the Premier League. But before anything else, survival itself has to be secured. Meanwhile, in a completely different corner of the transfer market, Fenerbahce SK are reportedly intensifying their pursuit of Bernardo Silva. The idea of a Turkish club signing one of Pep Guardiola's most trusted players on a free transfer might have sounded unlikely not long ago, but the situation is evolving quickly. Club officials are said to be preparing direct talks with Silva's representatives, underlining just how serious their interest is. What makes this move particularly intriguing is how well it aligns with Silva's current career stage. His contract with Manchester City is nearing its end, and at 31, he's entering a phase where long-term decisions carry more weight. For a technically gifted midfielder who has spent years operating at the highest intensity under Guardiola, the idea of transitioning to a less physically demanding league isn't unreasonable, it's logical. That's where Fenerbahce's pitch starts to make real sense. It's not just about the club's history or ambition, it's about timing. Silva is at a crossroads, and the Turkish side are presenting an option that balances competitiveness with sustainability. Whether that proves enough to convince him remains to be seen, but the logic behind the move is far stronger than it might initially appear. The Turkish Super League simply doesn't operate at the same relentless pace as the Premier League, where Bernardo Silva has spent years enduring high-intensity pressing across 40-plus matches a season. A slower, less physically demanding environment could be exactly what he needs at this stage of his career, an opportunity to let his technical qualities truly shine without constantly managing fatigue. His dribbling, vision, and passing might finally have the space to breathe. For Domenico Tedesco, Silva represents precisely the kind of intelligent, versatile presence his side has been missing in the final third. The expectation had been that Marco Asensio would fill that creative void, but things haven't quite unfolded that way. Silva offers a far more complete package, someone capable of both creating chances and contributing defensively, a balance that aligns perfectly with the structured, disciplined approach associated with the German coaching philosophy. Statistically, Silva's recent numbers may not leap off the page, but that's not really the point for Fenerbahce SK. They're not chasing raw output, they're investing in experience, authority, and a style of play that can unlock stubborn defenses. In a league where low blocks are common, that kind of composure and technical precision becomes invaluable. However, the real challenge lies in the competition. FC Barcelona are also reportedly interested, and that shifts the entire dynamic. Regardless of their well-documented financial issues, Barcelona remain one of the most powerful names in football. A player like Silva, available on a free transfer, is exactly the kind of opportunity they rarely ignore. Compared to that, Fenerbahce are operating in a different bracket altogether. Their advantages are more strategic than historical: willingness to offer significant agent fees, a lucrative signing bonus, and perhaps most importantly, the promise that Silva could be the central figure in the team. That last factor might carry real weight. At this stage of his career, the appeal of being the main man could influence his decision. Whether that's enough to compete with Barcelona's pool is another matter entirely. Meanwhile, at Liverpool FC, a different kind of uncertainty is unfolding. Reports suggest the club could be open to selling Alexis Mac Allister this summer, with both Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid monitoring the situation closely. On the surface, it sounds like just another transfer rumor, but there's a deeper implication here. Liverpool are reportedly viewing Mac Allister as a tradable asset, not an untouchable core player. That shift in perception is tied to his noticeable decline over the past 18 months. It hasn't been sudden, but it's been steady enough to raise concerns. This is a player who once dictated the tempo during a title-winning campaign, controlling games with intelligence and composure. Now, that influence has faded. The downturn actually began toward the end of that very season, almost immediately after the trophy celebrations. There are mitigating factors, of course: injuries, a disrupted preseason, but the broader team data paints a worrying picture. In the current league campaign, Liverpool have been outworked by their opponents in almost every match. For a system built on energy and intensity, that's a glaring issue. And when your central midfielder, the supposed engine of the team, isn't covering ground at the required level, the entire structure begins to falter. Despite all this, Mac Allister remains a high-value player. Estimates still place him around £70 million, and for a club that spent heavily last summer only to endure a disappointing season, financial balance has become essential. The approach, as outlined by the club, is clear: sell before you buy. This brings the real question into focus. The issue isn't that Mac Allister lacks quality, it's that his strengths no longer seem to outweigh his limitations within the current system. Liverpool's midfield has become easier to bypass, transitions have slowed, and the overall rhythm has lost its consistency. It raises an uncomfortable possibility: perhaps he simply no longer fits. Under Arne Slot, the tactical demands are clear: high pressing, constant movement, relentless intensity. Mac Allister has never been defined by his physical output. Even at his peak, he was more about intelligence than endurance. But when a player built on vision is forced into a system that prioritizes non-stop running, the balance shifts. The brain stops dictating and starts coping. In that context, selling him wouldn't necessarily be a mistake. It could be a calculated decision, provided the club can find a suitable replacement. And that's where the real challenge lies. Identifying a midfielder who can restore both control and intensity, while also fitting within financial constraints, is far easier said than done. Whoever is brought in to replace Alexis Mac Allister at Liverpool FC won't just need to match his qualities, they'll need to go further. The next midfielder has to bring back the energy, the control, and the consistency that have gradually faded. So the real debate isn't simply about whether Liverpool should sell. It's about succession. Because if there's no clear answer to who comes next, even a £70 million transfer fee won't fix the underlying problem. That's the dilemma hanging over Anfield right now: is this a smart reset, or the kind of decision fans will still be questioning years down the line? Over in Spain, a far more unexpected name has entered the conversation at Real Madrid. Sebastian Hoeneß isn't exactly a household figure outside of Bundesliga circles, but according to reports, he's now firmly on Madrid's radar as a potential replacement for Álvaro Arbeloa. Arbeloa, It's worth remembering, stepped in as a temporary solution midway through the season after pressure mounted on Xabi Alonso. The campaign has since drifted off course, with no silverware in sight and a Champions League exit at the hands of Bayern Munich acting as the breaking point. In Madrid, contracts rarely guarantee stability, and even one running until 2027 can quickly lose its meaning when results don't follow. Arbeloa's position now feels fragile. He's still there, but more out of circumstance than conviction. What makes hain such an intriguing candidate is the contrast he represents. Unlike the high-profile names Jurgen Klopp or Mauricio Pochettino, who have often been linked with Madrid in the past, hain arrives without the weight of global expectation. Just a few years ago, he was guiding VfB Stuttgart through a relegation playoff. Since then, he's transformed the team, securing a second-place league finish, lifting the DFB Pokal, and keeping them competitive in the race for Champions League qualification. His approach is defined by intensity, high pressing, quick transitions, and the ability to build cohesive teams without relying on superstar signings. But what seems to have impressed Madrid most isn't just the tactical side, it's his resilience. Managing a squad without elite-level resources and still delivering results requires a level of mental strength that Madrid may now value more than reputation. Still, there are complications. Hain is under contract with Stuttgart until 2028, and there's no release clause to simplify negotiations. That means Florentino Perez and the Madrid board would have to negotiate directly for a coach who hasn't expressed any desire to leave. Ironically, his recent contract extension, once seen as a sign of loyalty, has now become a major obstacle. Inside the club, there appears to be a subtle shift in thinking. Big names like Didier Deschamps still carry appeal, but they also come with demands, expectations, and strong personalities. Hain, by contrast, is seen as someone who would prioritize structure over status. He's unlikely to walk in making sweeping demands about star players. Instead, he'd focus on building a functional system. There are mitigating factors, of course, injuries, a disrupted preseason, but the broader team data paints a worrying picture. In the current league campaign, Liverpool have been outworked by their opponents in almost every match. For a system built on energy and intensity, that's a glaring issue. And when your central midfielder, the supposed engine of the team, isn't covering ground at the required level, the entire structure begins to falter. Despite all this, Mac Allister remains a high-value player. Estimates still place him around £70 million, and for a club that spent heavily last summer only to endure a disappointing season, financial balance has become essential. The approach, as outlined by the club, is clear: sell before you buy. This brings the real question into focus. The issue isn't that Mac Allister lacks quality, it's that his strengths no longer seem to outweigh his limitations within the current system. Liverpool's midfield has become easier to bypass, transitions have slowed, and the overall rhythm has lost its consistency. It raises an uncomfortable possibility: perhaps he simply no longer fits. Under Arne Slot, the tactical demands are clear: high pressing, constant movement, relentless intensity. Mac Allister has never been defined by his physical output. Even at his peak, he was more about intelligence than endurance. But when a player built on vision is forced into a system that prioritizes non-stop running, the balance shifts. The brain stops dictating and starts coping. In that context, selling him wouldn't necessarily be a mistake. It could be a calculated decision, provided the club can find a suitable replacement. And that's where the real challenge lies. Identifying a midfielder who can restore both control and intensity, while also fitting within financial constraints, is far easier said than done. Whoever is brought in to replace Alexis Mac Allister at Liverpool FC won't just need to match his qualities, they'll need to go further. The next midfielder has to bring back the energy, the control, and the consistency that have gradually faded. So the real debate isn't simply about whether Liverpool should sell. It's about succession. Because if there's no clear answer to who comes next, even a £70 million transfer fee won't fix the underlying problem. That's the dilemma hanging over Anfield right now: is this a smart reset, or the kind of decision fans will still be questioning years down the line? Over in Spain, a far more unexpected name has entered the conversation at Real Madrid. Sebastian Hoeneß